Well, this is going to be our first attempt at making something here in the Bodie kitchen. We're going to attempt to make a German apple cake. It's a very simple recipe, but there's a few things that you should be aware of that you might want to utilize in the future whenever you're baking or cooking. And the first is your mise en place. If you're following a recipe, rather than scramble for all the individual ingredients that you need, lay all your ingredients out and then pre-measure them. For example, one of the things that we'll be using is the vanilla sugar that comes from Germany. This is an extract and flavored sugar. This happens to be 2 teaspoons. So this is what we need for this recipe. 2 teaspoons of Dutger Oetker natural vanilla flavored sugar. Now you can make your own, you can Google that, or you can probably find something of this nature or similar on Amazon. We went ahead and squeezed our lemon juice. We pre-measured our sugar, which for this recipe happens to call for 1/2 cup. The lemon juice, by the way, is 2 teaspoons. The other ingredients that we're going to need is flour and butter. Well, one of the things that I unfortunately discovered when I was looking for the butter is I had a pound of it, but it was in the freezer. Now the recipe calls for 1 stick, which would be, what, 1/4 cup, I believe, of room temperature butter. So there's a trick to that. You take a glass, you heat it up, you put your butter on a little saucer, standing up, and then you put the hot glass over it. This will soften your butter to room temperature, and it's a lot better than using the microwave where you have the possibility of melting the butter, which you don't want to do. All you want to do is soften it up to room temperature, because we're going to whisk it with sugar and it would not work if it were melted. Okay, so we're going to do that next. I'll show you how that works. And today we're using Gala apples, and utilize Boscop, Golden Delicious, even Granny Smith. But I prefer the Gala because they have a nice sweet taste and they're very, very juicy. So these are the ones we're going to use. 4 of them, small ones. Now what you want to do is you want to take the peeled apple that's been cored, cut it in half, and then cut it into quarters. Now here's the trick. You have to be very careful not to cut through the apple, but you want to make nice thin slices into the apple. That way the apple cooks and the moisture is released, and it gives everything just an extraordinary taste. We're going to do this with all 4 of the apples. It's a little time consuming, but it's well worth it. The thing is you can't see where you've made your cut, so you really have to go by feel and by memory as to where the last cut was. Well, we got 2.5 done so far. I know in some of the patisseries, some of the really, really unique bakery stores and dessert stores in Europe, they slice these really thin, but they've had years and years of practice to get these cuts. 1 more and we'll be halfway done. Yeah, not only does it give it flavor, the apple, by cutting it, but it also helps the apple cook a little bit faster. Another thing that should be on your mise en place is, of course, the flour. Now here's an interesting little tidbit that I recently learned. By the way, we need 1.5 cups. Remember that, we need 1.5 cups of flour. So there's 1 cup. Now we need another 1/2 cup. There it is. I think it's hard to read. Yep, 1/2 cup. Now, and again, I just learned this. You measure out your flour. That's 1.5 cups right there. Now, in order to make cake flour, it's very simple. Okay, I was talking about the mise en place. Well, one of the things that we have not put out yet was the flour. And the reason for that is because this recipe happens to call for cake flour. Do I have any cake flour? No. So what do I do besides running to the store and looking for cake flour and all that? Nope. I measured out the flour that I need. And to turn all-purpose flour into cake flour, you remove per cup 2 tablespoons of flour, and you replace that with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Yeah, cornstarch. So, considering we have 1.5 cups of flour, 1 cup would be 2 tablespoons, and 1/2 cup would be 1. So we're going to take 3 tablespoons of flour out and replace it with 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Very simple, right? Sure. One, 2, and 3. The trusty cornstarch, or the secret powder in Chinese restaurants. So we replace the flour with cornstarch. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now the important part is you want to be able to mix this up really, really well. You want to get the flour and the cornstarch incorporated into your recipe. And the best way to do that is by utilizing the old sifter. And just gently pour this in and start to sift. I'm going to use the other hand since I'm right-handed. Works better. And as you sift, that all gets mixed together. Plus, takes out any lumps, things of that nature. It's just a good way of incorporating all the ingredients into your recipe without having to do anything goofy like going to the store to buy cake flour. Well, now that I've got a nice mess, let's move on. Another thing that we should have incorporated into our flour and cornstarch mixture, our cake flour, is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So we're going to add this, unfortunately, last, but we'll mix it up anyway. So there's 1 teaspoon baking powder, and 2. Oops, and I missed. Good job. I'm going to throw a little bit more on. All right, now that's incorporated. I've got a mess, so I'm going to clean that up and then we'll continue, okay? Thanks. Alrighty then. We have everything about ready to go, I think, to start actually preparing the cake. I have a 9-inch, this is a 10-inch spring form, I believe. Yeah, this is the 10-inch. I have my flour, I have my sugar, and I also have 3 large eggs. Now let's see how our butter's doing. Remember, it was frozen solid, and I put it under the glass, and now it's more pliable. So I'm going to go ahead and try it, hoping that it'll work, because it's not quite to room temperature, but it's not solid like it just came out of the freezer or the fridge. That goes into the blender, or into the KitchenAid. We'll put this away. But one of the things that I learned from my mom was if you have one of these butter wrappers, it works perfectly for buttering a sheet like this to get just a light coat of what we unfortunately refer to as fat, but it'll help release the cake, the cheesecake. When it's done, you just never know how much to put on it. So, there we go. I'm going to set this to the side because we'll need that in a few, and we're going to go ahead and start mixing the butter. I've got the paddle on here, and I'm going to start slowly. It's perfect. It's working fine. 2 thumbs up so far. Once this gets creamy, which takes about 2 minutes, then we're going to add the sugar. We're going to whip it some more. Whip it good. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this do its thing, and we'll be right back. So my butter looks pretty good. It's getting nice and creamy. So I add my sugar and let it go for another 2 minutes so that it can all incorporate and get nice and fluffy. That's what we want. We want fluffy butter. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to speed it up a little bit and let it go for another 2 or 3 minutes until everything is incorporated. In fact, I'm going to take a break and scrape down the sides, and then we'll continue. Okay. We've been beating for about 2 minutes or so on medium speed, and I'm going to add our eggs, one at a time. Come on, there we go. And we're going to beat this mixture for at least 30 seconds after every egg. Once it's incorporated, we want to go to high speed. And let it mix for about 30 seconds or so.